You believe the stories that you tell yourself about how things are. So often you're wrong.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Live Through That. I'm your host, Mike Hipple, and on this podcast, we'll dig a little deeper into a pivotal moment into the lives of some of my favorite artists from the 80s and 90s. And this week, we're going to do something we haven't done before, and that's release 2 episodes this week. Today's episode is with Nick Feldman, a founding member of the 80s new wave band Wang Chung, and later in the week, we'll have his bandmate Jack Hues on for an episode. Today, Nick tells us about the rise of his band and how chance meetings with key people altered the course of their history.
So I suppose my what I want to talk about has kind of 2 threads to it. So sort of key meetings with people and the kind of stories that we tell ourselves in life and how wrong we can be about what we think is the truth. So I think key people I met, well, obviously Jack, my partner in Wang Chung, it was a very key person for me because I met him by putting an ad in the Melody Maker. So it's sheer luck that I found him. I spent a load of money on creating this rather important looking advert in the Melody Maker, making myself seem as someone when in fact I wasn't, and put all the money I had into this ad. And Jack sort of answered the call. I auditioned him. Quite a lot of people answered it actually because I think I did a good job on the ad, and but he stood out as the best person for me. He was I devised this sort of quite complicated guitar chord sequence that he managed to navigate really well. And anyway, he was obviously right, and so that started a long association together in sailing. We had our ups and our downs, but it was obviously the fact that we're talking now to having this interview is testament to the longevity of the success we've had together. We're still good friends. We sort of we've ebbed and flowed together sort of along the years, but when you think you're in a situation, I suppose to quote John Lennon, life is what happens while you're busy making other plans. So we thought, Jack and I eventually managed to get a record deal with Arista Records. It was, quite a good deal. We made what turned out to be a record that we're proud of. We made a good record, but it didn't have the big hit song on it, and so the record company eventually started to sort of question and started to slightly question their belief in what we were doing. And it was, the writing was on the wall, and it was quite clear to us that we were probably on the brink of getting dropped. I remember sitting in a room with Jack and the band and have this sense of impending doom about it, and it was really quite a difficult moment where we were. I remember thinking, what the hell am I going to do with my life? I've had a little go at doing something in the music business, sort of following my dream, but it's clearly not going to work out. And once we've been dropped, we've probably had it. So, and then sort of cut to next scene, as they say. Cut to next scene was us sort of being signed to Geffen Records in the US, and just embarking on a very successful record, Points on the Curve, had various hits on it. Suddenly we were sort of really successful very quickly. And we got to that point by by a chance meeting. So another chance meeting. I used to live with my sister. Her good friend was someone called David Massey. David Massey came over to see her one day, and then I kind of got talking to him, and I played him the Wang Chung record, and told him that we were struggling a bit and that things were looking a bit sort of, that the record company had stopped really believing in us, and we felt that this might be it. And we had a really interesting chat, and he said some interesting things. He was young. Was very keen to get into the music business proper, and he sort of bored with his job that he had in Paris at the time, working at Burberry's. And I just thought, well, he's clever. I like what he's saying. I just instinctively asked him if he'd be interested to manage us. And he was like, I'd love to do that. And, cutting again a long story short, he managed to, after a lot of bobbing and weaving, managed to extricate us out of the Arista deal. And we'd gone into the studio and recorded some new stuff, one song of which was Dance All Days. He played those demos to Geffen in America, and they just freaked out, loved it. And John Kolodner, who was the A&R guy there, signed us. So suddenly, we'd been sitting in that room, kind of feeling pretty despondent about our whole musical career being only 10 minutes long. And suddenly we were getting signed by, Geffen in the US. And, shortly after that, we were in the studio recording at Abbey Road. And then shortly after that, we're in the American charts. So I suppose the lesson from that is, obviously key people are very key to, but also the kind of stories you tell yourself, what you assume is the case isn't necessarily the case. So just be open to new things happening. And as Woody Allen once said, just show up. So I think that's what we did. And things just shifted. I think the next chance, the key meeting was with William Friedkin, the legendary film director of The Exorcist and The French Connection. Jack and I had sort of got bogged down again, this time after the success of Points on the Curve, getting a lot of pressure from the record company. Oh, where's the hit? Where's the hit? Where's the hit? We couldn't, everything we wrote was good, but it wasn't quite working, didn't quite cut the mustard as far as the record company were concerned about hit record. And we were starting to feel, oh God, this is all heading in a bad direction. It was exactly at that time, like the cavalry coming over the hill, that William Friedkin approached us to do the soundtrack to his new movie To Live and Die in LA that he was editing. And he not only did he not want a hit single, he didn't even want a song. He just wanted instrumental music, gritty, sort of dark, energetic. He was inspired by the song Wait that we'd recorded for Points on the Curve. So the brief was literally the diametric opposite to what we were getting from Geffen Records. And it was incredibly liberating. It was inspiring and also very exciting to be working with a Hollywood legend like William Friedkin. And I think so the whole process of that experience took the pressure off us commercially. It stimulated us. It sort of cleansed our palate, if you like, and gave us a kind of an amazing experience. And it very much paved the way for us to be able to sort of get back on the kind of horse of our sort of more pop rock career and be able to write and record songs like Everybody Have Fun Tonight and Let's Go and all the big hits that came off Mosaic, So it was a very key and pivotal moment, to use the appropriate word, as the whole thing took shape. And then we had this sort of idea of, why don't we, because William Friedkin was so incredibly positive about what we sent him. He was so excited about it. He even started cutting the movie to the music that we sent him. It was all very spontaneous and very kind of liberating. So the whole project started to morph into something else. And then, Jack wrote a song called To Live and Die in LA, which Friedkin hadn't asked for a song at all. Sent that to him. He loved that. And he even shot a whole sequence in the movie, especially to put that song into the movie. So that's when we had the idea, why don't we make this our next album instead of, doing what the kind of album that Geffen were hoping we were going to do. Let's do not only a soundtrack, let's write some more songs and sort of hybridize, it between songs and instrumental stuff, which is basically what we did. And when we did that, and once there was a song called To Live and Die in LA, I think Geffen started to see that maybe it had something for them to work with, and they could kind of get behind it being the next stage in our sort of pop career, if you know what I mean. So they were initially very reluctant, but in the end they kind of went with it. So yeah, and it turned into a successful record, and the film did okay sort of in theatrically, but it went to number 2, I think. But I think it became a big hit in the rental market, the movie. And I think our album sort of just sold solidly, even though To Live and Die in LA itself was maybe not the most obvious sort of hit song. I remember John Kolodner, the A&R guy, saying that the track sort of, the chorus went down, it goes down into the chorus, instead of up. So things like that, which were quite hard to deal with, but we stuck to our guns, and the whole thing overall became a success for us, and a very strong follow-up album to Points on the Curve. I think after another sort of key moment for me was after we toured in 1987. We toured a lot, with 6 months on the road. I was finding it, I found the first half of that period quite difficult, because I just wanted to be in the studio and writing and recording, and I particularly enjoyed playing live then. And I sort of found it sort of emotionally, physically quite difficult. And I sort of reached this crisis point where you either go with it or you kind of crash and burn. So I decided to go with it and sort of rode the horse the way it's going, so to speak. And but I think with that went a certain kind of rock and roll kind of way of going with a flow a bit, almost too much, if you know what I mean. Life on the road. And I think at the end of that, I was pretty ill, and I ended up, and again, I'm cutting a long story short, I ended up, back in London after it all was over, in hospital, but I got Crohn's disease, and I was in total agony. I couldn't do anything, and I couldn't go out. I couldn't eat properly. I was just sort of housebound. And in the end, I got some horrible complications, and I had to have surgery. So I remember coming around after the operation, and I just felt for a couple of days just so absolutely awful. I just thought I would never recover, that my life was permanently sort of ruined, and but slowly and surely I got better and became human again, and sort of I suppose I'll never forget that story that I had in my head, that I was forever destroyed and I would never recover. And within not that long, I was sort of able to live a sort of much better life, and get back on the horse and do all sorts of stuff. So that was a sort of profound moment of realizing what we tell ourselves isn't always right, and just to keep yourself open to, as I said before, just show up and to be open to possibilities and to not presume that you know how things are, that maybe there's something else going on. So I'll never forget that. And I think that led sort of very interestingly on to the rest of my life, really. You know, we'd done, Jack and I had done Warmer Side of Cool. It didn't quite work out. It wasn't a commercial success enough. Geffen decided to sort of part company with us. And then Jack decided to that he wanted to move on as well. So that was, so we all went into quite a challenging period of sort of where you have to kind of reinvent yourself. You have to you know, you got used to living in a certain way, and suddenly everything's changing. And I personally felt very quite insecure. I'd lost a lot of confidence. I felt very, didn't know what to do with my life. Felt very vulnerable, and it was at that time that my old friend Jon Moss became Jon Moss from Culture Club. You know, the drummer with Culture Club. He became a really important part of my sort of recovery. I'd been in the studio with Tony Swain, who'd actually was the producer of To Live and Die in LA. I'd had this idea of doing a cover of Something in the Air by Thunderclap Newman, and I really liked the song, and I sang it pretty well. And I'd had this whole sort of idea of how to do it with that kind of soul to soul beat that was just starting to be popular at the time. And John, I played to John, who's, you know, my old friend, and he absolutely loved it. He said, let me get involved, and I think I can improve the kind of the overall sort of rhythmic side of it. And so we worked together on it, and it became a really big sort of club record, a really sort of anthemic underground sort of club record. It was the summer of love in the UK, and you know, both of us were kind of slightly wounded from our experiences with our respective bands. I was sort of feeling a bit sort of you know, hurt and disorientated by what had happened with Wang Chung, and as was John with the Culture Club. So we decided to do this track, and we went with an independent label, and we didn't say who we were. We just kind of kept ourselves anonymous, and you know, it became this sort of really cool underground thing. And you know, NME sort of made it their single of the week, and you know, what's interesting to me is that having sort of come out of Wang Chung feeling slightly, almost slightly ashamed about being in Wang Chung, it was a very, that was the story I was telling myself. I think we had been perceived by those in the UK is that we'd sort of gone off and sold our souls to America, and so there was a certain amount of inverted snobbery about us in the UK at the time. So, you know, that was quite wounding. So you kind of, in the end, I think I'd sort of taken that on board much too much. So when I started working with John, there was all this sort of new energy. He kind of really believed and was really into what I was doing. And and then the reaction we got was so strong, and then we ended up, once the Something in the Air had done well, we did some more recording, and and I really felt completely revitalized and really affirmed, and sort of proud, and I think I'll never forget that sort of from morphing from that slightly wounded, almost ashamed person into something that I felt much more, in my power, more proud of what we were doing. And that was again a pivotal moment, I think, for my development.
After feeling in a bit of a creative slump, another chance encounter results in a bit of a career left turn for Nick.
So after Promised Land, and I think I sort of, again, that didn't quite work out. The timing it worked out very well at the beginning, but it ultimately didn't work out. We fell back into that familiar. We signed to Epic Records in the US. It was the timing of it was just completely wrong. It was when grunge was just starting, and the kind of music we were playing was the opposite, really. So it was the wrong sort of time. So I mean, in the end, that didn't work out, and I sort of felt maybe a little bit lost for a couple of years, sort of. But then my father met Rob Dickens at some do that he was at. Rob Dickens, the chairman of Warner Brothers UK, and previously the Warner Brothers Worldwide, and they just spoke about me, and Rob said to my dad, "I'll just tell him to come and see me." So I went to go and see Rob Dickens, and we had lunch together, and he was very warm towards me, and but I didn't think anything of it other than, I felt a bit sort of nervous, to be honest with you, because I was still sort of suffering from this slight shame of my past, and then the next week I got a call from Warner Brothers saying, "Would you like to come and work for us as an A&R guy?" I was like, "What?" So I ended up. So of course I was sort of delighted about that, and I think at that particular point, I think I was creatively in a state of sort of exhaustion. I was tired of generating everything myself. So the thought of working as an A&R guy, working with other people's creativity and helping them to achieve something good, became much more appealing to me. But again, I've suffered from feelings of being a bit of an imposter. It took me a long time to grow into the role, if you like, and it also, I had to rewire my brain to a certain degree, because I had a whole completely different perspective on things, and I really learned a lot from that whole experience. And I did A&R. I mean, I for about 12 years or so, and I ended up being head of A&R for Sony Europe as well. So I mean, I had a very wide and very interesting career doing that, and I learned a hell of a lot. But it's quite one thing that I really quickly realized was that my background of being in Wang Chung, of having been there and done it and been successful, it helped me to, and the way people responded to it, which was really sort of positive and impressed, and it really helped me to do a good job, and I could speak the language to the same language to the musicians I was dealing with. I understood how they felt. I learned how to understand the other side of things, the record company side of things, and I felt I became much more proud of what I had previously achieved. It was very good for me to sort of reappraise my whole career, really, and myself, and again, that's yet another example of, you think you know how things are. You believe the stories that you tell yourself about how things are. So often you're wrong. You're telling yourself stuff that isn't true. And if you just sort of put yourself in the flow of things, and you show up and have an open mind and be ready, then it's incredible what can happen. And then I sort of finally, I suppose I'd sort of like to acknowledge my now wife, who once we kind of moved in together, I suddenly found myself, and again, to my own surprise, being very inspired, so creatively. So I didn't think I would ever, and it was natural. So the songs basically have been pouring out of me the last few years, and I'm very keen to record them both with Wang Chung and solo as well, whichever's appropriate. But I'm sort of, I would never have expected that to happen, to be honest with you. I thought that race was run for me, but I think I'm more fertile now, creatively speaking, than I think I've ever been. I think I feel more on my game, not only as a performer, but as a writer, than I've ever done before. And I love playing live now, whereas back in the 80s, I didn't enjoy it so much. And now I enjoy it because it's so great to be able to interact much more directly with the fans. It's easier these days to do that. Also, I'm just much more who I am, I think. I don't feel the need to have to define myself like I clearly felt I used to have to do. So I can sort of just embrace it more and enjoy it, and it's very rewarding. And so yeah, I feel creatively in a very good place, both as a performer and a writer. And who'd have thunk? I'm not getting any younger, so it's it's been a gratifying point on the curve. I'm on a good point on the curve, to use an appropriate expression.
And that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much to Nick for being on the show. We'll have his partner in Wang Chung, Jack Hues, on the show later this week. And a quick reminder that you can also buy my book on 80s musicians and where they are today, 80s Redux, and its sequel, Live Through That, on 90s artists. You can buy that wherever you buy your books. And if you like this show, please leave a review where you're listening. It always helps the algorithm find us. And of course, subscribe so you'll know when the latest episode comes out. You can also follow me on Twitter and Facebook at Mike Hipple Photo, all one word. Thanks for listening.